program for you today. These are some young people that are really doing amazing work to make sure that climate justice is considered a human right and that we have a sustainable planet going forward. You're going to hear some really wonderful initiatives that are going on. I did also want to mention to all of you that just a couple of days ago, the United Nations General Assembly passed a resolution stating that a healthy environment is a human right. And that's a very important initiative, and it really helps the initiatives you're going to hear about today move forward all the faster. I also want to introduce our two interns that will be taking over this meeting, and I will relax and just enjoy the program. And it's Katie Kurnick, who is from the University of Michigan, and she's a Master's of Social Work student there, and Zane Taylor, who's at the University of Nevada, Reno, and I will turn it over to them.
Awesome. Thank you, Bruce. So yes, welcome everybody. My name is Katie Kurnick. I use she, her pronouns, and I am an intern with the Unitarian Universalist Association. And I'm joined by Zane Taylor as well, who will also be joining me on this brief little introduction to climate change, just to get us started before we talk with our speakers. And just if you have any questions, please save them for the end or type them in the chat, especially questions directed towards our panelists this evening. So we have three awesome speakers today, three people who have a lot of experience in this area and all kind of do different work as well. So we have Vhon Michael from 0 Hour Philippines, MargaretBurton from MargaretBurton Inc., and Solomon Yao from Pacific Island Students Fighting Climate Change. So we wanted to give you a background for those who aren't as familiar with what climate change is and what climate justice is. Climate change is, the more formal definitions are a change in weather and the Earth's climate. So a lot of times you see this manifest, and you might have heard it in the news, or if you're keeping up with a lot of the news, especially this time of year with wildfires or melting icebergs, things like that. And many factors can cause the climate to change, but human activity since the 1800s has been a main driver of that climate change. So that is why it's really important to take action, especially for nation states to take action. And then climate justice, which is what we're talking about today, is a term. It's more than just a term. It's a movement that acknowledges climate change can have differing social, economic, public health, and other adverse impacts on underprivileged populations. So it's really standing up for a lot of populations that have been impacted by climate change. And that's to seek justice for those populations. And we can talk a little bit more about what we mean by populations that have been impacted by climate change.
Hi, everybody. My name is Zane Taylor. Like Bruce said, I'm going to my final year at the University of Nevada, Reno, studying international affairs. And so climate change, is not just a one-off issue. It reaches beyond wildfires in my hometown or typhoons in the Philippines. It spans to a variety of other world issues that we experience in our day-to-day lives. So you can see 6 examples of different issues that climate change intersects with, including displacement. The UNHCR reported that 21.5 million people have been displaced by climate events since 2008, and expects it to go up even exponentially from now. And then food security. We're seeing declines in yields and crop suitability under higher temperatures, affecting our food supply internationally. Women and gender and sexual minorities are less likely to survive climate-related events due to disparities in healthcare treatment and information dissemination. Along the lines of conservation, habitat loss influencing species distribution, whether it's from man-made events or from technically natural events at this point. We're seeing species become unequally distributed due to climate change. And then with health, the exacerbation of heat illness and food, water, and vector-borne diseases due to the unsuitability of both food and water. And then poverty, an estimated 130 million will be pushed into poverty, which the UN defines as $1.90 per day in the next 10 years from climate disasters.
And we wanted to include this graphic as well, because on the previous slide, we talked about intersectional issues that are impacted by climate change, but we also want to talk about intersectional populations that are impacted by climate change. So this is just a graphic of just a few populations of individuals that are disproportionately negatively impacted by climate change. That includes LGBTQ plus individuals, women, caregivers, those living in poverty, BIPOC, which is people of color, Black, Indigenous people of color, and disabled folks. So we just wanted to offer you the chance to contact us if you are interested. We'll kind of pop this slide up again at the end. But again, my name is Katie, and I'm joined by Zane and Bruce. And feel free to click on these links, which are accessible. So we will get started with our first speaker coming up next. Zane will introduce the speaker, and then we'll have him present and share all of his various expertise. And then we will ask him one question before we move on to the next speaker. And then if you have a question while any of the speakers are talking, just please put it in the chat and we can get to it at the end.
Perfect. Well, it's my pleasure to introduce Vhon Michael. Vhon Michael is an 18-year-old climate justice activist and grassroots organizer from Capologan City, Philippines. He's studying political science and started getting involved in organizing to address and fight environmental issues and climate change in 2017 at his local school, which was 4 years after Super Typhoon Haiyan ravaged his island in 2013. In 2020, he started Zero Hour Philippines and did solo strikes in Region 8 to demand his local leaders to ban plastic, fossil fuels, and take action against climate change, which included a youth climate conference attended by hundreds of youth leaders. Included in his work, Vhon has worked with 0 Hour International, Fridays for Future Digital, the UN Environmental Program, UN Food Systems, and the Sierra Club on various projects. As an award-winning writer, poet, playwright, and more, his work is focused around bringing his narrative of living on one of the hotspots of typhoons on the front lines of the climate crisis to the international scene while fighting for equality, gender justice, better food systems, grassroots organizing, and other intersectional topics. So with that, I will hand the floor over to Vhon.
Thank you. Am I audible?
Yes, thank you.
So I am Vhon Michael Tobes, an 18 years old climate activist from Samar. I am the founder of 0 Hour Philippines and Project AIM. I am one of the youth task force member of the United Nations Decade on Ecosystem Restoration, youth liaison of the United Nations Food Systems, and an ambassador of the United Nations Environment Program and Earth Day Network. Good morning from the Philippines. So before I start, I would like to raise a warning that this presentation mentions murder, death, racism, homophobia, and many more that could trigger some. So what would you do if you were born in a part of the world where the most drastic and disproportionate effects of the climate crisis hit? What would you do if you were only a child? I live in a beautiful community situated in between the mountains and the sea. But I grew up with typhoons banging on my doorsteps, demanding to be let in. Each year, we experience at least 10 typhoons and storms, one after another. What used to be a few months of typhoon season became a whole year. I remember as a child helping my family nail woods and layers of plastic on our door and window frames to keep the water from seeping in when the typhoon hits, gathering most of my cousins and relatives in my house, jamming to Filipino music in the dark living room with ramen and egg, while the adult men are outside keeping an eye on the sea level and making sure our house doesn't get flooded. It happened so often that it became a tradition for our family. Being situated in the center of the Philippines, next to the Pacific Ocean, our small island has become a hotspot for typhoons. We tried finding the silver lining in all this while being confused what this is. Then we didn't know that term climate change. So we resorted to questioning and blaming ourselves with maybe this is happening because we deserve this as a punishment. As people of the sea, for decades we have been in sync with the ocean surrounding our islands. We found that silver lining in the joy we have created being together during disasters. That even though after all this, we have our family. Until 2013, just weeks after a storm, the media and the experts started panicking, recording a very large low pressure area in the Pacific Ocean that turned into a super typhoon in just a few days. And it's directed at my region. American journalists started flying to Tacloban City to experience the strongest typhoon to date. Everything was a blur. What we had then were flown away by record breaking winds, rain, plus storm surges. In terms of casualties, it is among the deadliest typhoons that have hit the Philippines. Super Typhoon Haiyan has left more than 5,600 people dead, and over 1,700 are still missing up to this day, almost 9 years after Typhoon Haiyan hit, and 26,000 injured in the central Philippines. The cyclone has affected more than 13 million people in 44 provinces. It has damaged more than a million houses. For over 3 months, we had no electricity, no service, houses left in ruins, no clean water to drink, and depending on the packed corned beef that other countries have brought for us. Celebrated Christmas with no roof over our head of millions of Filipinos. And as we go into a new year recovering and rebuilding our lives back up with what was left garbage by the typhoon, we celebrated Christmas of 2014 with no electricity, hundreds of dead, cities in chaos fighting over food because another typhoon hit. And a few days after Christmas, another one struck. The same thing happened in 2015, and again, until we got numbed and just existing for the effects of the climate crisis wipe us out. In 2020, a strong typhoon made landfall on my island, leaving communities submerged in flood waters for weeks with no media coverage and government support. So other leads of different national environmental organizations in the Philippines helped me. I did an interview with Vice News US to demand actions from the government and demand coverage on what is happening on the ground. Still no action. So we took matters into our own hands and started collaborating with different organizations and led donation drives where we raised over 100,000 for my organization and others raised more. United, we organized donation drives in many parts of Summer and Leyte. And as we recover, another typhoon hits, and then another, and another, and another, and another, and another one. 6 typhoons in a span of over 2 weeks, wherein two of those typhoons are considered as the top two and three strongest typhoons in recorded history, wherein Super Typhoon Haiyan sits at the top unbothered. December 16, 2021, just a few months after a huge typhoon that hit my island, I moved to Cebu for college. And Cebu, along with Central Visayas, was met by the strongest typhoon of 2021. For a week, we were stuck in our house with little food, no drinkable water, roads blocked by huge trees, some people sleeping on the streets, and our hearts broken, seeing hundreds of dead and millions affected. For over a month, we had no electricity and service, no help from the national government and northern local governments, little media coverage. Five of the strongest typhoons in history all made landfall in the Philippines. Haiyan, Ambo, Pipito, Quinta, Rolly, Shoni, Tonyo, Ulysses, and Rai. 13 million people, 600,000, 4 million, 3 million, and millions more affected. and most that we have gotten from governments, the media, and the fossil fuel industry are praises of our resilience and thoughts and prayers. Actions make change, not thoughts and prayers. And as for the praises for our resilience, it's not a good compliment. Resilience isn't an inherent trait. It's something I had no other choices but to become in order to survive while I watch my family, people I know, and my fellow Filipinos float on flood waters. Resilience erases the narrative of those who didn't survive, and it erases how hard that survival was, how involuntary, and how horrifying it is to become resilient. The trauma and the survivors go, this is my life, and this is the reality of the climate crisis on the front lines. So, what drives the climate crisis? I hear a lot of people, especially in the global north, point fingers at overpopulation, when in reality, overpopulation doesn't exist. Overpopulation is a myth created by people in the global north to justify ecocide. And instead of taking responsibility, they point fingers at countries like China with over 1.4 billion people, India with 1.3 billion, and the Philippines 110 million people. But these numbers do not account for why the climate crisis exists or why it is worsening. Because the Earth has enough or even more resources to cater to the needs of everyone on the planet. Even now, we still have enough resources, despite having to raise the alarm for Earth Overshoot Day recently last July 28th. So, Earth Overshoot Day is the day that humanity's demand for ecological resources exceeds the resources Earth can regenerate within that year. So from July 28th this year, every days after July 28th this year, everything that we consume are reserved for next year that we are now consuming. So what actually drives the climate crisis? We have what we call the roots of climate change: patriarchy, colonialism, capitalism, racism, sexism, homophobia, and ableism. But let's focus on the top four. Patriarchy is a system wherein it praises male dominance as the one true natural way of life, where men are above everything else in the natural world. Patriarchy can corrupt both men and women. And because of patriarchy, men thought that they can control the world, hence the spread of colonialism, where centuries of torture, exploitation, and exploration came to fruition. Countries like mine are not developing countries, but rather countries that were robbed and overexploited, and we are currently recovering from the effects of colonialism and imperialism with little to no resources to support our development. Pre-colonial era, Filipinos saw women, transgender people, and homosexuals as leaders. So before we were colonized, our normal was we praise women because we saw women, transgender women, and homosexuals as leaders. We had babaylans or shamans who are co-leads of different ethnic groups across the islands of the Philippines, heroines fighting for their people when necessary. But the thing is, we didn't have any actual conflicts. We were in harmonious relationship with our neighboring islands and countries like Malaysia, China, Indonesia, and Thailand, all protecting the environment and the earth, until Spaniards were threatened by our way of life and started killing our non-male leaders, burned our sacred texts and history, and hailed men as the leading group for over 300 years of exploitation and torture of our people and environment. With capitalism, we saw Philippine forests come to a huge decline in just 50 years, with Americans and other foreign nationals controlling the mining and oil industries in the country, leaving nothing to our people, which is also a reality for many countries in Asia, Africa, and South America. I have friends who were forced to work as farmers and fishermen as young as 6 years old. And in elementary school, we spent most of our time planting crops in our schoolyard and different plants in a separate school garden. Many children in the global south are forced to work in order to supply demands in the global north. My friends spend a day fishing only to sell it with nothing left for them. And in terms of development, many, even up until now, forests are cut through. Islands and coastal communities are under fire from reclamation projects, either led or supported by the United States government, expelling our people from their lands and their homes demolished. Our trees are cut, and our environment is destroyed in the name of development. Patriarchy birthed colonialism, capitalism, and racism. In the recent Global Grassroots Leaders Climate Summit and private negotiations with the United States government, I attended as the youngest delegate at 17 and one of the three delegates of Asia. I raised these concerns of how we reject development if it is at the expense of our people and our environment. And though many people from around the world have supported my message, many also disagreed simply because I was either brown, gay, or a kid. But it doesn't end there. Because of these four, the lives of many environmental and human rights advocates and activists are in danger. I received my first death threat at the age of 13 for speaking out against a corrupt politician who was supporting land reclamations in my community. As a campus journalist and editor in chief of my school publication, I have had so many adults disregard my opinion simply because I was a kid living in one of the most dangerous country on earth for environmental defenders with tens to hundreds of indigenous people and environmentalists being killed each year. The last few years have been a living hell for me and my friends. I watched my friends and people I work with get arrested, tortured, and murdered one by one, only because we are protecting the interests of the people and the environment. I had my whole life robbed from me because I needed to be resilient. I needed to be strong. I needed to think like a leader. So, what can we do as individuals, as a family, as a community, as citizens? Many people believe, especially in the global north, that we no longer have time and that we should just accept the reality. But the actual reality is, people in the global south are resisting and revolutionizing to turn this around. As long as we fight, there is hope. Because if people in the global north lose hope, we lose our lives. Every single fraction of a degree of warming we prevent is lives saved, especially in the global south. Although climate change is a global issue, countries like mine are experiencing its worst disproportionate effects. Maybe for you, it is a future thing, something that is yet to come. But climate change is our reality. It has been for so many years. So our actions matter and they count. Even though I encourage individuals to take small scale actions, at this point, they really don't actually change anything. To reverse this and prevent reaching the point of no return, we must demand actions and accountability from governments and the destruction and demolition of the fossil fuel industry, plastic industry, fast fashion, and control of the industrial agriculture that exploits our people and the environment in the name of profit. But we do still need to discuss individual actions that we can take to inspire others into taking action. So here's my story. First time I heard the term climate change was in 8th grade. Even then, it wasn't really that clear. It did concern me. I was raised in a house nicknamed by my community as a garden because we had a little forest in our backyard where a lot of people hang out. I grew up loving plants, the sea, and the forest, and spent most of my days building little houses with my mates at mountain or hilltops or swimming by the sea. Though it was taught, I realized now that what was taught to me in eighth grade wasn't enough because it was only an overview, and everything that was taught to me was either a myth or a misconception about climate change. But because of my science teacher every day since I spent learning about climate change, I was vice president then of the General Science Club. So I also had opportunities to learn more about climate change in workshops and events outside the school. By ninth grade, I was president of the Youth Environment in Schools Organization, or YESO, General Science Club, General English Club, General Math Club, and also editor-in-chief of the school publication. I also held a high position in the City Federation of Student Leaders. So I took this opportunity to organize workshops in my school and different schools to spread the word about climate change from my year of learning. In ninth grade, I also ran for student council president and won over 70% of the votes against two senior students. I held three of the highest positions in the school, and I used it to make my school environment friendly and inspire people to take actions against environmental issues and climate change. Through writing, filmmaking, photography, and public speaking, I organized nearly 100 workshops across my region. In 2018, I led an action to demand my city to ban single-use plastics after I successfully banned single-use plastics in my school. But beyond these events, what actually inspired me more and has kept me going are the conversations I had with communities across my island, especially in far-flung and remote areas that I was able to visit, to teach them what climate change is, talk about our lived experiences, and learn their community-based solutions against environmental degradation. The family and community I was able to build that supported me all throughout. Their stories I have told every time I was given a chance to be a speaker or to be interviewed. I do hope that as you listen to me right now, you do not only hear their voices as echoes in mine, but hear them clearly, hear their cries and demands. In early 2019, out of the thousands of student leaders in my city, I was chosen to represent my island to the regional assessment of Save the Children. For weeks, we have assessed the situation of the children in and out of school in the region. But it was hard because I was one of the only three children in a room full of adults arguing with us that they know better what we are going through than us. Though it was frustrating and traumatizing, we were able to create a document, and I'm seeing the products of those weeks of work being distributed to schools and communities right now. In December of 2019, after weeks of skipping classes every Friday to solo strike and protest in different provincial buildings, risking my streak of being a top student, I decided to form Zero Hour Philippines. For its launch, I spent over a month planning and gathering individuals. On February 29 of 2020, I solo organized the launch of Zero Hour Philippines with over 100 representatives from different schools, youth organizations, and the youth office of the local government through a youth climate conference. From then, we have hosted virtual events, gathered thousands of volunteers across the Philippines, hosted zero-hour talks, several cleanup drives, relief operations with other organizations, and attended and co-organized several local and national events from 2020 up to the present. For the entirety of 2020, I personally funded the projects of Zero Hour Philippines, excluding the donation drives for the relief operations. In August of 2020, I formed the Zero Hour Southeast Asia and Zero Hour Asia Alliance. I launched these organizations through an ASEAN Action Week, wherein we highlighted the different climate change exacerbated issues that were affecting many Southeast Asian countries in 2020, and ended the Action Week with a petition that I principal authored that was sent to the ASEAN government with thousands of signatures and support from over 44 countries. For Earth Day 2021, I led the celebration of Earth Day in Asia, Pacific, and Africa, with multiple on-the-ground strikes in several countries across Asia, online webinars for the whole month of April with speakers from Asia Pacific and Africa, and an on-ground 3-day conference in my city for the celebration of Earth Day Philippines. After weeks of meetings and several proposals, I was able to get on board several national and international environmental organizations and my city to fund the event with speakers from national and international organizations, the local government, and from the Climate Change Commission of the Philippines. The celebration was attended by over 200 participants on the ground during the first day of opening, and with over 1,000 joining on live coverage via Zoom and Facebook. In October of 2021, we launched the 100 Days to Beat Plastic Pollution campaign with the United Nations Environment Program to highlight how Southeast Asia has become a hotspot for marine plastic pollution and how communities like mine are being forced to consume plastic without sustainable options being available to us, even though the concept of sustainability originated from low income communities like mine. And in 100 days, we reached over 20 million people worldwide, with over a million people interacting with our Instagram filters. I did interviews with BBC News and Vice Global News to talk about the campaign and how vital it is to act now on the plastic pandemic. In November 2021, I was displayed at the United Nations COP26 for leaders to hear my demands and create decisions that would actually save my people and hundreds of communities in the Philippines and the thousands of communities in the global south being left behind in recovery projects and the current climate actions and projects from their governments. In March of 2022, I founded Project Educate, Inspire, and Mobilize, or Project AIM, where we ensure that any and all climate education resources are easily accessible and easy to understand. We create these resources in many different forms, such as textbooks, a website, music, audiobooks, short films, animations, and even interactive games and filters to make it interesting learning about climate change, while also recognizing that different people have different ways to learn, not just reading. These resources will not only be available in English and national languages in different countries, but also in many local, native, ethnic, and indigenous languages across the world. Just in the Philippines, we have over 100 spoken languages, and current resources are 90% in English and the remaining in Filipino. But I speak Waray and Bisay. And there are 100 more languages where communities in the South are not really familiar or fluent in either English or Filipino. So they are being left behind. This accounts to why in a 2020 Harvard study reveals that over 50% of Filipinos are not aware of climate change, despite being the country most affected. Currently, I am trying to get funding for my trip to COP27 in Egypt because for many years, even though I am living in one of the most affected islands in the world and in one of the most vulnerable and most affected countries in the world to climate change, my region and my community have had no representation at any national or international conferences, events, or decision making processes that decides whether our lives on the front lines matter. In my 9 years as an environmentalist and over 3 years as a climate activist in the international space, I have been working to bring the voices of my people and the communities in the Philippines that are being left behind to the global space and share our experiences and community based solutions and knowledge we can offer that could advance our strategies in the fight against climate change. I believe that my voice is essential to be heard at COP because I have both the climate knowledge and first-hand experience, that are integral and vital in making actually radical and revolutionary climate actions. Thank you so much.
Perfect. Well, thank you for for sharing your story with us, Vhon. I believe there's one more slide after this one that shows where you can support him. But I did have one quick question before we get to the general Q&A at the end, which I hope you stick around for. But since you started your climate justice journey at such a young age, could you describe a time where you faced pushback from older generations that might occupy more space at those decision-making tables, and how you address those that don't take you as seriously because you are Gen Z? I think you're muted.
Okay. So wherever I go and whatever room I am in, I am always pushed aside, invalidated, or silenced because I am young, gay, Filipino, brown kid from a poor community. But I don't stop. I keep raising my concerns and keep on fighting for my right to a livable present and not just a future. In honor of the loved ones, friends, classmates, and people I know that I lost to climate change. I have always lived by the principle that true advocacy means going beyond conversations with people who already agree with you. What adults should know and remember is that we are the key group. We are a key group to look at when discussing things like this because we are capable and we can do this. We started the movement to stop climate change because we have inherited a crisis we had no hand in creating. Our present and our future are at stake. And with this, I believe that we are the leaders we have been waiting for. We can and we will. This is an intergenerational fight. So if older generations won't let us in, we are going to take the lead. Leaders have been failing us each year at COP. And mock COP has created more solutions in less than a week than leaders did for over 2 years.
Perfect. Thank you. Well, I will hand it over to Katie to introduce our next speaker.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing, Vhon. We really appreciate your perspective. Next, I would like to introduce the next speaker, Margaret. I'll put actually their this website in the chat if you'd like to just take a look. MargaretBurton is a climate justice activist and clothing nonprofit founder from Charlotte, North Carolina. Her nonprofit provides a solution to fashion waste by using only donated clothes to create fresh new styles to shop from. She believes there are already enough clothes in existence for us to create from without needing to use more of the Earth's natural resources. Her nonprofit also focuses on teaching her Instagram followers and the local community sewing basics and sharing resources to have a voice in holding the fashion industry accountable. Awesome. Margaret is also my cousin, so I have a bias that her fashion industry is, her fashion work is really awesome. So we're going to just get started with a video to further introduce Margaret. And started.
There's human beings behind the clothes that we wear. What drove me to make this collection is bringing more awareness to the fact that it's not just machines that are making your clothes, it's people, and that things have become so cheap and so fast that people assume that it's a machine doing all the work. I'm just like so scatterbrained, like that I go from one thing to the next without fully finishing anything. There's like a fear in like finishing something, you know? I wanted to continue being seen as an artist and not so much a clothing designer. I kind of wanted to just spell it out for people, real plain and simple. Look at all of the pieces that it takes to make your clothes. I decided to only use things that have already been made for this collection. It's been like donated from friends and family. I can like look at certain looks and be like, oh, I got that from my dad. Why does he need 7 pairs of the exact same Levi's? I don't know. You can see where the stitching used to be. Things are much more tailored and fitted. Now you have fast fashion and things are so ill-fitted on the body. I had to outsource a couple things at thrift stores, and then I spent my time taking those apart with friends, turning those into yardage, and then remaking my own designs from those materials. I was getting really frustrated with fashion because I was like, how can I use this medium to bring about change or bring about something good? I had the opportunity to go to India, and there I visited some factories where all of our Western clothes get shipped. It was just crazy to see the amount of clothes that were at these factories. Why am I shopping at these fabric stores when I can just make fabric myself out of things that are being thrown out? I want people to gain a new perspective on fashion. I want to unveil the glam that it's so often portrayed as in magazines and bring it back to its rawness. So I would like to have people meditate on that.
Awesome. So right before we get started, I'll just share Margaret's slides and can feel free to take it away.
Thank you, Katie.
Mhm.
Since that video was taken, I have been able to get more sleep. So hopefully I come across as less crazy as I did in that video. I just want to say, first of all, thank you guys so much for having me and giving me this opportunity to speak against just such amazing young people that are doing so much for their communities. So thank you so much for that. And thank you everyone else who's here to listen from us young people. To give some context for that video was taken my senior year of college when I was in fashion design school. And the whole journey that set me on to trying to make a collection made from donated clothes was started during a junior year internship in New York City. I was interning for a high-end women's wear brand and was shocked when they put me in a room and they asked me to cut all of the clothes in half. And I, as a student at the time and knowing how difficult it is to make clothes, I was like, why am I cutting everything in half? This is ridiculous. Why aren't we giving these away to people who need clothes? And they explained to me that if we just threw the clothes on the street or if we had given them away, then that would devalue their brand because poor people would be seen wearing their clothes. So obviously I was shocked and disturbed. And so I started looking into and researching, is this how the fashion industry handles their waste? And I came to find out that majority of businesses either threw their pieces out or they burned them. So that is what fueled the fire for me to create a aesthetic and create a collection only using clothes that had already been made, because I just didn't see any reason for needing to use more of Earth's natural resources to create new fabrics. And another big player into that was being able to go to India and firsthand seeing where a lot of our clothes end up, clothes that we give to Goodwill, they get sold to places like India and Africa, and they end up doing a lot of harm to their markets. And well, I'll get into that a little bit later, but yes, so Katie can go to the next slide, please. So we're going to, since that video was taken 6 years ago, we're going to talk about where fashion has progressed today. So currently today, fashion is responsible for 2 billion metric tons of CO2 emissions, more than France, Germany, and UK combined. There are 7.8 billion people in the world, and the fashion industry is creating 150 billion new garments per year, and it's looking to increase. There's brands like, you know, when that video taken, the hot brands were H&M and Forever 21, and now Shein, spelled S-H-E-I-N, is looking to just massively continue making fast fashion and more clothes. And a lot of those clothes are made by slave labor and just very bad conditions. 87% of clothing is incinerated or sent to a landfill still, and those textiles can take up to more than 200 years to decompose, especially if they are materials like sportswear that have plastic in them and don't decompose. It takes almost 8,000 gallons of water, what one person drinks in 7 years, to make one pair of jeans. So as you can see, you know, 6 years had gone by and we are still just increasing our consumerism and the clothes that we buy, and people are continually wanting cheap clothes made fast and that they can just buy seasonally. But then that brings us to our next slide. So as a solution, I built a nonprofit called MargaretBurton Inc. that I hope to be a solution for fashion waste. We take donated clothes and then we turn them into upcycled streetwear and one-of-a-kind pieces. We also offer another service where I call it memory pieces, where we take a customer's clothes or clothes left behind by a loved one who's passed away, and then we make that customer a piece from those clothes. Just continuing that belief that I have, that I believe that there's enough clothes in existence that we don't need to be creating new fabrics. And you also just get very meaningful, memorable pieces that you'll want to pass down from generation to generation, rather than just buying clothes seasonally. I would say that the biggest challenge for young sustainable designers that are coming up right now that are wanting to change the industry is just more eyes and more desire for sustainable clothes. I think that there's still just a very large amount of people that want to buy cheap clothes. So it's very hard to sell sustainable and ethical made clothing because it's almost twice the amount of work, or because people are being paid fairly to make the clothing, the price has to go up more than what our generation is used to. So I just think that that goes back to just needing to educate and talk about what's going on in the fashion industry, and just the importance of buying into brands that are trying to do good and trying to combat this big system at large that has a lot more money and resources than we do. So that leads to the most important thing, which is that it all starts with our youth. Because so many people for so long have been used to buying cheap clothing, it's more important now than ever to be educating our youth, and also educating those older than us of why it's important to shop ethically and sustainably. I moved to Charlotte, North Carolina to teach an after-school program to refugees and inner city children. And one of the big takeaways from teaching those classes was just that that kids have such a desire to learn how to sew. I think there definitely are people here that remember having home ec class, and my generation and a lot of the generations after me do not have home ec. And I think one thing, by having home ec in high schools, it taught people the effort and the amount of time that it goes into making like one shirt or one pair of shorts. It's a lot of work. And when you know how much work that is, then you know that buying a t-shirt for $5 makes no sense. When you have to buy for the resources, the shipping, the people making the clothes. So one thing that I learned was just that kids are eager to learn, and that it teaches them to appreciate clothes and to think about who's making them and the price of it. And another thing is that by giving them those skills, they can also have a creative outlet and to be more individualistic with what they wear. If you don't have the time or desire to learn how to sew, I suggest you become friends with a local tailor. And rather than throwing away the clothes that might have a hole in it or might not fit you anymore or might be the fit that you want, then you can take it to a tailor and just have those adjustments made and still hold on to that clothing. The third thing is buying secondhand. There's so many resources to buy secondhand now. There's so many apps like Depop and Poshmark. There's just so many young people who are getting into the thrift and secondhand space that you can support by shopping through them. The other big thing is that before the 1960s, the majority of people had at least 12, no more than 12 items of clothing in their closet. It wasn't common to have more than 12 items. People really invested in good clothes that lasted a long time, and saving money and budgeting for 1 to 2 new pieces a year was a big part of your saving plan for a family. So that is another thing that I would hope that people would learn to adjust in as they're growing up, as they're shopping, is to just make a budget for your clothes and buy clothes that will last you a long time and that you could see yourself wearing for years. Lastly, if you do have clothes that you need to get rid of and give away, make Goodwill your last stop. So before going to Goodwill, go to like local shelters, nonprofits, look for artists that might upcycle. The reason for this is kind of what I was saying before, is that Goodwill has so many clothes. They are so overwhelmed by the amount of clothing. They can't store it all here. So they sell shipping container loads to other countries. And then, for example, like in Ghana, their markets will buy these shipping container loads of clothes, and then the local markets will try and sell these fast fashion items. And a lot of times that ends up hurting the local markets and the local tailors, because people are no longer buying, from the fabrics that are prized in that area or from those tailors, and people are just going for the cheapest Western thing. And a lot of times those clothes just end up on beaches, and there's just piles and piles of clothes that are building up there because of all these clothes that get sent there. So that's just one example, but there are many others. And that's why if you do have clothes, try and look for someone who can use them productively before they end up in a landfill or in another country. The last little helpful tip is that there is a link there for a business called Help See, and you can go on their website, a bin in your location, then you can request a bin in your city. And they work with local people in trying to discard of fibers in upcycle ways and turn it back into fabric that we can use again. And lastly, the biggest change that you can do right now is to follow these two accounts, Fashion Revolution and Remake Our World on Instagram. If limiting the amount of clothes that brands can make is something that sounds good to you, or having fair pay and rights and a living wage for the women who make our clothes also sounds good to you, then follow these accounts and pay attention to the petitions that they create for us to sign so that real change and action can take place, because these petitions is what really can change the environment, the fashion political environment. And that's what we really want. And that's where real change happens. And thus concludes my little presentation. And I just can't thank you guys all enough for being here.
Yeah, thank you, Margaret. Just as an immediate follow-up, I know you talked a lot about the challenges that you face in the fashion industry, especially with the lack of sustainable options and the lack of, effort that goes into highlighting sustainable options. So where do you see your brand expanding in the future? Do you see it addressing those inequities head on, or where do you see it going from here?
So this is kind of my big picture idea. My big picture idea is that I think mass production is not slowing down. There's already factories that are being created that don't involve human beings. There's like t-shirts, pants getting made just from robots. So I think that more people like me on small scales is going and being an option to our local community and to our states. And I think that there just needs to be a lot more local tailors. And I think that will, sorry, I feel like, okay, sorry. So what I'm saying is, because of all the mass production and the way it's headed, I think that there are going to be a lot of uniformed clothing. I think that there's going to be a lot of clothes that people can buy cheaply, but I think there's going to be a hunger for people to have clothes that express themselves, or say a little bit more about them, that's a little bit more individualistic. And the only way you're going to be able to do that is that if you buy into local tailors, you're someone that you know is maybe a state away, or that could ship something to you, but that's nearby. So I think that the future, I don't see myself scaling my business. I see myself as staying small, because I think that scaling is just still being part of the problem. And I think that there just needs to be more encouragement in shopping small and shopping from people like me.
Awesome. Thank you for that feedback, Margaret. I think we times at UUA talk about how local change is really important too. So thank you for your presentation. We appreciate it. So as a reminder, if you have any questions for Margaret or Vhon or Solomon, which are our speakers, you can write them in the chat or be ready to say them at the end. We'll have a little bit of time at the end, but I'll pass it over to Zane to introduce our final speaker.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Margaret. Thank you, Katie. But last but not least, Solomon Yo holds a Bachelor of Arts and a Bachelor of Law and is a climate activist from the Solomon Islands. He's working alongside civil society and youth in the region and beyond to advance climate justice through practical and global solutions. Solomon was one of the 27 law students who founded the Pacific Island Students Fighting Climate Change, or PISFCC, in 2019. He currently serves as the organization's campaign director and is now relocated to New York to campaign alongside Pacific governments and stakeholders to galvanize a simple majority of UN member states to vote in favor to adopt a UN General Assembly resolution requesting the International Court of Justice to issue an advisory opinion on climate change. And so with that, I will hand it over to Solomon. I think you have the ability to share your screen and we're looking forward to it.
Thank you, Thomas, Jane, and thank you everyone for allowing me the opportunity to speak today, to share with you my story as well. For that, I would like to thank the organizers for this amazing event, as well as to our previous speakers who I found very entertaining, as well as very educational and very relevant, and great to see people are thinking like this around the world. It gives us a bit of hope in this very madness of the world we call ourselves. We see ourselves and we live ourselves in the moment. It's good to see people like this. So thank you very much for sharing. Today's presentation, I know we are really pressed with time, so I'll try my best to keep it short. So it's just a story that about our campaign and why I'm here in New York as well. And of course, why is this such an important thing, not just for the Pacific Island countries, but the whole world in entirety. So this is a story that we are trying to take the world's biggest problem, climate change, to the world's highest court, which is the International Court of Justice. So today's presentation I outline is just the origin story. So where all this started, how it all started about, what is the campaign that we're pushing for, and how the progress we've made along the years, and more importantly, the civil society alliance that we have formed to take on this amazing campaign, and also going forward, what is the next steps forward for the campaign, and finally to conclude what how can opening up avenues in which you or your friends or anyone who's interested might be able to support the furtherance of this journey. Before I begin, I would like to thank and put my utmost respect to those who came before us, our forefathers and foremothers, who back in the days in the 90s, starting from the 50s to the 70s to the 80s to the 90s, and continuously into the future, have been fiercely advocating against the production, the movement, the shipment, and the usage of nuclear energy and weapons. Of course, this is a horrible invention that is created by mankind, and it's continued to be a threat and a deep and painful history, especially for people in the Pacific. But also drawing on the history of the Pacific Islanders who once took the same campaign that we did, but on a topic on nuclear weapons back in the 90s, where you can see on the screen, you see on the bottom left, that's Hilda Lini, that's the Minister of Health, and the sister of the founding father of the Vanuatu government, which are currently leading the campaign to take an advisory opinion, to seek an advisory opinion from the International Court of Justice on climate change. Back then it was nuclear weapons. Alongside her was Pauline, she's a Maori elder from New Zealand. And then you can see Neroni Slade, who is from Samoa, and Lijon Ekniklang, who gave a testimony on how she had 7 miscarriages of what they coined jellyfish babies when the nuclear testing were back in the Pacific. People have to go through radiation suffering, and she testified before the court, and that played a huge role in getting the court to understand the gross and injustices of and inhumane outcomes of the use and test of nuclear weapons. So a bit forward into the future, back in 2019, myself and 26 other law students, we're thinking like, hey, this is a final year in law school. This is the University of South Pacific, a regional university. And then we sat down in the classroom one day and like guys, this is a final year. We should do something really meaningful. You know, as we graduate from this university, we're going into our respective countries and try to help our region address problems. And all of us, of course, in a heartbeat said, climate change is, of course, the single greatest threat that is facing our region and our countries. Survival is at stake. So hence, what can we do about it? As law students accumulated an immense amount of knowledge and experiences in the study of law, and including governance and politics and international regimes, what can we do and what can we find in terms of our academic backgrounds, what solution that we need to push forward, and what's the most pragmatic way, and also what is most relevant and would be taken up by our governments. So upon intense research, we came across the campaign to seek an advisory opinion to the United Nations General Assembly, requesting it to the court to answer a question relating to climate change. So our organization got together with young students from 8 different Pacific Island countries. We formed this organization known as the Pacific Island Student Fighting Climate Change. The essence of a research on this campaign is on it underpinned the underlining key themes are human rights and intergenerational equity. So why is this necessary? Because with the assistance of our lecturers, we have come to understand that human rights, our basic human rights and climate change, there's a nexus between the both. And as climate change intensifies over the years, we can see how it's impacting us on our basic human rights. I believe Vhon, if I may pronounce that properly, has really succinctly put it in excellent how our human rights, human beings, not just in global South countries now, but in human beings all across the world are facing immense threat to their human. But for the Pacific, if I may say, even our basic human rights, just collecting water, going to having access to nutritious food, and all these other things we need necessary to function as human beings in life are being undermined. Of course, it's not just about sea level rise in the Pacific. There's other issues such as increase of diseases, as well as declining of biodiversity and declining of especially our coral reefs, which provides the buffer to ensure our islands remain standing on surface. So in understanding that, how can we take a new approach to climate change, which is a rights-based approach to climate change, in a sense, bolstering human rights bodies all across the world to take more greater actions, and for governments in particular to recognize their duties and obligations to protect the rights of their citizens against the threat of climate change. And also in this case, we are also very concerned as young people in the Pacific. Although yes, our future is threatened, but even more concerning is a future of our children. So in this case, we decided that look, there's a need to ensure that governments recognize also not only the rights of the current generation, but the future generation. And in that essence, we would like to ask the International Court of Justice this precise question: what are the obligations of states under international law to protect the rights of the current and future generation from the adverse effects of climate change? We believe that when the court, International Court of Justice, also known as the highest court in the world, answering this question can provide much needed guidance and impetus to stimulate more ambitious climate action to ensure that we work towards achieving the 1.5 degrees Celsius target that was set in the Paris Agreement. So in the process of seeking an advisory opinion, as you can see, this is the roadmap that we've developed, is to secure at least a group of states, because if you want to secure advisory opinion from sorry, that was Ambassador. Apologies for that. Had to lock up the office. Now it's kind of late, getting late here. So the process, you would need states to, in order to initiate the process, the civil society or organizations cannot do this at the moment. The process, the avenue that we're trying to take requires a state. Only a state can process this. So you need a couple of states to do this, to take it to the United Nations as a resolution. So this is the first step for us in the Pacific, was to secure the support of our leaders, our governments, in order to take it out to the international sphere, to build a global coalition of like-minded states in order to pass it through the United Nations General Assembly. So in order to pass it, you need a simple majority. So that would be 97 states out of the 93 states. So we're hoping to see the vote actually coming into the play in the United Nations General Assembly 7th session this year. And once it's been endorsed by the UNGA, it will then matter will be referred to the court, where the International Court of Justice will have to take into consideration that question and draw upon international law, international treaty, and making a decision that would ultimately provide for that guidance that we dreaming and anticipating for so long now. Right. So it was very particularly interesting when we started the campaign. We were, of course, very naive young students and overly ambitious, if I may add. We thought that, look, this is something that we can do. You know, what do we got to lose except a little bit of our time, which of course we spend just watching movies or just playing with friends. So that's really not a good use of our time in comparison to what we're about to do. So we drafted the letters and we sent it out to all of the Pacific Island country members, our leaders, 18 member countries. And then later after sending the letter, we said, the universities in Vanuatu, why don't we go and approach the government of Vanuatu and see if they're interested to take this campaign? So a small team of us, of the 27 law students, those who were available that day, we got together and we visited the Foreign Affairs Minister, then Honorable Ralph Regan-Banu. We had a chat with him, and then from then they said, look, this is a great idea. We'll contemplate about it. But just we thought that, okay, great, at least we got them to be aware about. But on the 26th of July, the Vanuatu government actually took the campaign beyond that and advanced it into the Pacific Island Forum, which is the highest forum that we have in the region. And then the campaign became very, very serious from then on. So along the way, we decided, look, we need to also really try to raise the fact that of the vision that we created about the fact that we need to ensure that governments have the responsibility and obligation to protect the current and future generations' rights, and in particular, the rights of the future generations. So we try our best in trying to organize with civil society in Vanuatu, as well as getting young people to get engaged. As you can see here, there's some young people that we hold so very dearly to our organization, who has made substantial contribution in ensuring that the young voices being present at that time. So along the way, we have managed to reach out to almost 100 plus law professors across the world and seeking their support. You can see notable professors such as Jorge Vinuales, David Boyd, who's the Special Rapporteur on Human Rights, even Mary Robinson, and others who have thought that this is a great idea, that its time has come. We really need to push this through, as we do not have really much time to address climate change. And there's a lot of deadlock and a lot of political impasse that we're facing in the level. And we believe that advisory opinion can enable a breakthrough into this. So this gave us so much hope to pursue the campaign with the backing of law professors and influential people around the world. The time finally came when the matter was brought up in the Pacific Island Forum in 2019, on the same year when we started the organization. There we thought, after much campaigning, we thought the leaders would endorse it, but of course, this idea was still not yet convinced by the leaders. They only recognized it and only noted it, that they need to consider a request for an advisory opinion. Some of the students said, look, you know, we got it through a leaders forum, that's it, we done something amazing. Others were like, no, we did not actually achieve our goal yet in the Pacific Island Forum. We need to get a leaders endorsement so that they can advance it to the international stage. And as we go into that, some of us who really thought that this needs to achieve its end game, we continued the campaign, forming the organization, and went into the spaces in both national, regional, and international spaces such as COP25 in Madrid. We advocated and raised the profile of the ICCO campaign. As well as in the region, we have launched an enormous and massive campaign in trying to educating and activating young people across the region to understand the nexus between climate change and human rights, as well as drawing them to the idea that there's an actual campaign that can make this linkages more stronger, and holding our governments to be more responsible and more active in terms of addressing the climate crisis, as well as creating a future that is desirable for our children in the future. So we worked in so many forums in the Pacific. We also organized a lot of forums relating to climate justice, first ever actually in the Pacific, with other civil society, grassroots civil society, friends, families. Of course, it's a really tough campaign, so you have to reach out to your families to, you know, utilize that free labor to organize some events, as well as trying to get this through to the wider audiences. This is a very technical campaign, as you can see already, but we did the best in creating music videos, animations, creating petitions, and advancing its own all states to ensure that the public understand this in the simplest way possible. Later on, we decided that in order this campaign to be successful, as I've said in the earlier, a simple majority state is needed. We have called upon the support of youth from all across the world and together to come and work together on the campaign to influence their leaders in their respective countries. We formed the global network of the World's Youth for Climate Justice, which is the network that unites all young campaigners working on the campaign from Asia, Caribbean, Europe, South Africa, and the Pacific, of course. But then, of course, you have COVID-19 in early 2020 until late 2021. So the campaign really went smacked off the top of the priority list, and it was not taking much reception at the moment. But the youth in the Pacific have really stuck true alongside with the Pacific civil society and maintaining the advocacy and the momentum on the campaign, hoping that it still remain relevant in this time. And finally, in 2021, in September, the government of Vanuatu have announced publicly saying that it's time now that they revisit the campaign on the advisory opinion and really decided to take it more seriously now, to advance it on the global sphere and hoping to take it to the International Court of Justice. That gave us so much hope as we prepare together, collectively pull together resources and from the support of our of our civil society networks. We've managed to put together a solid team, and we went to COP26 to collaborate with our World Youth for Climate Justice members in organizing 3 side events to hopefully raise the campaign. At that time, it was very interesting because now the government of Vanuatu has been very positive and very receptive and very uniquely opened their doors to be able to work alongside the young people in the Pacific and elsewhere in advancing the campaign. You can see here two gentlemen in the middle. On the left-hand side is the Ambassador Odotevi for the Vanuatu mission here, who just came and asked me if I need the key for the office. And on the right-hand side is the Attorney General and the Minister of Climate Change and Foreign Affairs for the Fiji government. We've brought them on, and they've really shown their support at COP26 in Glasgow. We continue the campaign, continue inviting the governments as well as eminent legal experts to come and speak on the advisory opinion campaign in the University of Glasgow, as well as continuing forward in organizing events again at the COP venue at the Commonwealth, and bring upon members of governments as well as civil society around the world to talk about the campaign and promoting it. Just earlier this year, now that the campaign becoming more prominent, you have civil society from all across big INGOs as well as local NGOs coming together and saying, look, it's time that we need to form an alliance on this campaign. We also really would like to support this, but how can we work together more collaboratively? Our organization, of course, came together and brainstormed and like, okay, let's form a civil society alliance, in which we launched on the 5th of May, 2022. We brought upon our eminent, most respectful people in the region, as well as the Prime Minister of Vanuatu came and make a statement. Attorney General of Vanuatu came and make a statement. Of course, the AG and one of our living legends in the Pacific, Dame Meg Taylor, came and spoke about the campaign, saying that it is time that we really need to do this. And this is, of course, in preparation of the Pacific Island Forum 2022, which is concluded just last month, mid of last month, which we were building the momentum towards to get the leaders to endorse this. So the alliance was launched and brought together almost 1,500 plus civil society across the world, looking at CAN International, 350 Pacific, Oxfam, Greenpeace, Amnesty International, and so many others that come and join and saying, look, it's an amazing campaign, and an overarching aim of it is really to put human rights in the center of the climate change debate. And that's why it's so attractive and very meaningful, as it's all inclusive of all causes that, perhaps not all, but many, as much as possible, the causes around the world that people are advancing that is relating to climate change. So this campaign is really something that unites everyone together, and that's why civil society around the world are coming together behind this. Of course, it's a very complex campaign, but over time we have developed a toolkit that really simplifies and carries all all that you need to understand about the campaign. And if you can visit our website, you'll be able to download the toolkit and read for yourself what this campaign is all about, what it's trying to achieve, what will be the benefits if we achieve it, and how can this help the climate justice fight that we're all embarking on at the moment. So yeah, feel free to download that on our website. And just recently, in the lead up to the Pacific Island Forum, the Civil Society Alliance got together, which was the Pacific Island Forum was held in Fiji. The Civil Society Alliance got together there in Fiji and mobilized a massive civil society campaign that saw together CSO representative from all across the Pacific coming together to work and advance that campaign to seek an advisory opinion. So this is to pressure the 18 member state leaders who are coming to the Suva, Fiji, to have the campaign, to deliberate on the issues and the agendas they have for the Pacific. And the biggest is climate change. And the biggest ask from civil society and Vanuatu government was the ICJO campaign. Finally, 14th of July, it was 2 a.m. at night, and I got a message from friends and families back at home saying that, Solomon, we have achieved it. What we did not achieve in 2019, we've finally achieved it now. And people are crying, people are laughing, people are in tears, people are celebrating for days, people were drinking, of course. It was a huge excitement in the Pacific because everyone thought that it was a great idea. Everyone believed that the idea came organically from the young people. Everybody took ownership and thought that this was the greatest victory since the advisory opinion on nuclear weapons back in the 90s. We have not seen a massive campaign like this until today. People are so proud. Even civil society members are really happy and going to see how can we continue this campaign in the Pacific, but knowing that now that the leaders endorse it, the Pacific we are now moving the focuses away from the Pacific into the rest of the world. In the paragraph 46 of the 51st communique of the Pacific Island Forum, leaders call upon the United Nations General Assembly for a resolution requesting an International Court of Justice to provide their right opinion on the obligation of states under international law to protect the rights of the future and current generation against the adverse impacts of climate change. The precise text that the students developed back in 2019, the precise text that we put before the Pacific Island Forum, but was not given support. Finally, our leaders recognized the importance of this campaign and now 100% behind this as we move towards the UNGA. This was an idea that we botched in 2019, that we think that, hey, do you think that we could put like a message on top of the sea and then we have a traditional boat at the back? And we're like, get out of here, man. You start talking nonsense and crazy. But as you can see here, this dream has become a reality. Civil society got together, put on this text. They said it was really hard, and they got canoes and out there and made this text and took a drone shot. This was an amazing photo that, of course, will go down in history as one of the greatest achievement of civil society and youth in the Pacific, to encourage the leaders to take on a global initiative to help advance the fight on climate change. So what the success looks like for this campaign. The campaign has 3 phases. Phase 1 is to get it through the United Nations General Assembly. Phase 2 is to get it to the ICJ. Then the 3rd phase is the implementation. When the court delivers its advice, people around the world should utilize it to encourage the government to make sure that they fulfill their obligations to the Paris agreements and other obligations internationally and domestically to protect their citizens against the impacts of climate change. So at the current state, we're at phase 1, trying to secure the simple majority vote. So at the United Nations, we have 193 states. We need a simple majority, that will be 97 states. So national endorsement, as I've said, in the region, we have secured 18 member states to support this, but we need how many more numbers to get to that simple majority? So we look upon the support of countries across the world. And just whilst the Pacific Island Forum was going, the organization of the African, Pacific, and African, Caribbean, and Pacific grouping, which comprises of 79 states, UN member states, have said we have also endorsed the campaign to seek an advisory opinion. So 79 states, 97 states, hey, not doing bad. We just need a couple of more, and then we get the simple majority. And that's why the government of Vanuatu, as well, Pacific governments here, are working tirelessly day and night in trying to get more states to join on this amazing campaign to form the simple majority. So the target is the United Nations 77th session. It's not too far now, that I continuously be reminded by Alliance members and our colleagues who are here that at the United Nations Center session will open in September, and hopefully the matter will be put to vote later on December or January even, and hoping that at that time we have amassed from the civil society side a growing great number of support to enable to pressure our leaders to ensure that when it comes to the actual voting, they press the green button and not the red button to vote yes for climate justice. So that brings the end to my conclusion. I know it's not much. As I speed run through, I would love to explain more. But what I can say is this: if you really think that this campaign is appealing to you, and you really want to take part in this amazing journey, you're more than welcome. All you need to do is reach out to our email or our social media, as you can see there, or visit the website to learn more about the campaign. We'll be happy to support. We actually need a lot of volunteers for some crazy ideas here in New York as well. So if you're free, you're available, you want to support, you have some free time, please come and support the campaign to seek the campaign to take the world's biggest problem to the world's highest court.
Perfect. Well, thank you for that, Solomon. I know I can speak for everybody when I say that we're really excited to see that your campaign is moving along very smoothly. And thank you for also helping to demystify a little bit the United Nations system. I know that it can be a little bit hard to digest for those that aren't, actively working in it or anything like that. But so the question that I like to pose to you is, what has been the #1 challenge in trying to engage with the larger, more wealthy nations on your campaign, especially those that might have colonized within the Pacific Islands? And how do you address these countries and their leaders while still showing the importance of climate justice?
Thank you, Jane, for the question. I think that's a very question that I often battle myself, both mentally into the campaign of the periods, in the period of the campaign that I've engaged in. For the past 2 years, I've been involved, 3 years, I've been involved in 2 COPs, COP26 and COP25. In that area, I was part of my delegation in Solomon Islands, and I was assigned to the thematic area of loss and damage. So of course, loss and damage is very important for us in the Pacific, but as well as other countries around the world, especially in the global South. But unfortunately, every time we go to the negotiation room, and oftentimes we have the strong opposition from United States in particular, and the European Union, somehow it seems to me that there's strong national interest on, I will not mention areas, I'm sure our colleagues have already mentioned it already. It makes it difficult for them to take greater action on climate change or to budge a bit to ensure that they provide for the needs of the global and the demands of the global South country, who are of course at the end of the receiving end of the climate crisis. An anecdote I would like to share is back in COP26 in loss and damage negotiation. I recall it was 3 a.m. in the morning, and the next day is the final plenary of the COP. And we were sitting there, and then you have the Pacific, developing countries on the left-hand side, developed countries on the right-hand side, and they were coming to negotiate the final text on loss and damage. What the countries on the left were asking for is a new facility, a finance facility to ensure that developed countries are paying for the damages and loss that are suffered by these countries over the years, and most likely into the future. But then all I heard was lack of mandate. Sorry, we can't do much. This is what our instructions and the mandate is. We cannot do much. And repeatedly going across, you can see this amazing, I could not forget this. There was this young Jamaican negotiator sitting there, and she was just like putting the text to the table and said, look, this is what we want. And they said, no mandate. She said, give me 5 more minutes. She went back to the team, wrote a new one, came back. This is the new one. Said no mandate. The determination of these people are really incredible. And if there's people you need to respect in the world, it's the negotiators, especially for the global South, who are giving their best. Of course, with so much at stake, this is how you should act, actually. But the problem is that the continuous lack of mandate. It reminds me that there's a lot of gaps and roadblocks in negotiations. And this is, of course, very, very sad, because why should global developed countries not budge in and commit to the obligation to the Paris Agreement to assist these countries, and continuously coming up with excuses like lack of mandate, but it's far more deeper than that. It's not easy as it sounds. And last month, we also had the major conference and the campaign at the International Court of Justice in Hague, Netherlands. A leading expert on the international law and one of the main advisors to the Vanuatu government, Jorge Vinuales, said that this is perhaps the single most important decade in history and in the prehistory of Homo sapiens, that this decade is really a last chance to avert the climate catastrophe, and that may end human society as we have known it, resulting in unprecedented suffering and decline for all economies, all peoples, and all society, as succinctly highlighted by our colleague here, Vhon. And we must continue to remind us that global North and global South countries are really just part of this one ecosystem, and we really depend and thrive off each other in order to truly address the climate crisis. We really need a global cooperation within this ecosystem. And one thing we also must understand is that we will eventually reach a green future, of course, but it does not mean that we have attained climate justice. And in order to build a green, to do that, we really need to build a green, not just a green future, but a just and equitable future where human rights is not only meaningful to the color of white, where women in Bangladesh, Vietnam or India are not exploited to satisfy the high consumerist lifestyles, as our friend Margaret has explained to her presentation. It's terrible, it's ridiculous. And then this, of course, will be the greatest test now humanity will face, is on whether we need to build bridges or we to build walls. I hope that answered the question. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. As you can see, we have gone a little bit over time, so feel free to stay on if you would like. We're just going to ask the speakers one more question, and we ask that the speakers are brief in their answer, but we wanted a kind of concluding question about how do you keep your hope alive in your climate justice fight, and how do you keep your drive for change going when your work is often not prioritized in action and policy change. So if each of the speakers want to speak on how they keep their drive for climate justice alive, and then we will conclude, and I'll pass it off to Bruce and we will be finished.
Does it matter who goes first?
No, Margaret, you can go
Okay.
ahead. Mhm.
I'll go first. I mean, this year I was met with complete burnout. And so what I had to do was I had to just step back, and I had to just be quiet and just do a lot more sitting in silence and reconnecting with myself. And I feel like what keeps me going is just community and people and stories, and just hearing from more people like Vhon and Solomon, and reading about what is going on and what people are doing. That just continues to fuel my flame and just empower me to keep going. I think that for someone like me who isn't a lawyer, I think that a lot of times I can get myself down and I can think, oh, like, you know, lawyers are doing the real change and they're, you know, doing the most work. But I think that it takes it's going to take a village to tackle this thing. And it's going to just take a bunch of small community efforts and a ripple effect of just stories and meaningful impact. Because I think that's when that's the only time that people listen, is when they have more personal connection to the thing that's happening. So I think that the more people we can meet, the more stories we can hear, the more it's personal to us, and we can have empathy and for others and see what's happening. So yeah, I think just like hearing stories, and also checking in with yourself and making sure that you're feeding yourself, your soul and your sleep and your everything, just so that you can keep going on a sustainable path forward in order to care for others and yourself, I think is very important in this work. And yeah, just community and just continuing to getting to know other people that are doing the work.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Margaret. Vhon or Solomon, if you'd like to answer.
I think, yeah. So I've always focused on community because I believe that love wins revolutions. And with community, we can actually inspire little and big actions in different corners of the world. And my community has kept me going. The community I have built all throughout my journey of being an environmentalist have pushed me to be stronger and to keep on doing what I am doing. And I do agree with Margaret that a lot of people are a lot of people get inspired when they get a connection with the thing that they face. And I have been preaching that we need to um, personify the climate crisis. We need to show them that there are people on the ground that are actually suffering, for them to see that this is a reality and that there are people like us on the front lines on the ground that are currently suffering and that are currently facing the extreme disproportionate effects of the climate crisis, and that we need to act now because this is not a future thing and this is present for us. So I think that's what kept me going and going. And I also mentioned earlier that if there are like disagreements between me and someone, I believe that true advocacy means going beyond conversations with people who already agree with you. So true advocacy really takes your like will and perseverance in actually inspiring people to take action.
Thanks, Margaret and Vhon, for sharing. For me, it's just three things I just pinpointed here. First is, of course, the future generations. I have a lot of nieces and nephews around there. And of course, before that, there was this young kid, as I've shown in my presentation. His name is Junjun. He's a young boy in Vanuatu, and we used to live in the same neighborhood together. He always come up and very fascinated about how climate change and how he could participate in it. That seeing his eager to really fight for his future really gave me a lot of strength. And of course, over the campaign of friends and families meet with their children, of course, you can see the hope and energy and life, full of life in them, and the pureness of them. So how can these children be able to, this children like this going to live in the future that is really, really, really scary, and of course might not be able to be necessarily be safe for them? How can we really, as young people here present, who are the last gatekeepers of whether we take the decision to allow these injustices to continue and ultimately destroy us, or be the last generation to really take a stand and really make the right choices for our future generation to live in harmony with their environment and not in fear of it? So looking at their eyes, looking through their eyes, I said, like, look, if that's the case, and if the sacrifices I need to make, I think that's the thing I need to make for you all. And it gives me so much strength to see them always writing paintings and little notes saying that you need to keep this fight. We're rooting for you. We're happy for you. This really gives me a lot of encouragement to go on each day, although this campaign is purely torture, to be honest. Second is the communities. Of course, back at home, many people are very proud of the campaign and proud of the organization, as a lot of their cousins and nephews are part of it. And of course, it really resembles the true voice and the true narrative of the Pacific Islands. And of course, having the support and the continuous encouragement, it gives us a lot of strength to take this campaign, especially the ICGO campaign. It's really something that the Pacific would really, really want to do, as endorsed by 80 member countries, as endorsed by civil society, as endorsed by young people in the Pacific. So allow this as the one of the frontline communities allow us this opportunity to present this solution in order to save, in an attempt to try to save our countries as well as the rest of the world. And lastly, I'm a big diehard fan of birds. I would like to indulge myself and take some time to watch birds. I really enjoy that particular species on this earth. But unfortunately, back at home, biodiversity, not just in Pacific, but of course elsewhere in the world, are declining, and we might not be able to see such precious specimens across the world and enjoy the beautiness that we have, and not just, of course, not just birds, but the rest of the species. But for me, it's the birds. Thank you, Tomas.
Yeah, thank you. I heard a lot of similar things like love, care, especially your communities and people that you've interacted with, and even the future generations, and going down to individual passions and interests like birds or art or creativity. So thank you all for sharing. I'll pass it off to Bruce to conclude us this evening.
Yeah, thank you all for being here. This event has been recorded, and we want to get the recordings out to all of you, so you will have it. I really think that you need to take these recordings and make sure that many other people see this, because this has been an absolutely amazing event. I really want to thank our 3 speakers and our 2 interns. They put this together, and it's something inspiring to me. I hope it was inspiring for you. And I also want to note that you have 3 speakers here, but they represent large communities. There are a lot of people that are working with them and behind them and inspiring them and helping them with their work. So it's a lot of people, and that we need to increase this and make sure that everyone of whatever age really works hard on this issue, because it's the future of our planet. It's the future of all of us, and of this generation, the next generation, and all the generations to come. It's the birds, it's the plants, it's all of the animals, it's the entire life on this planet. So I hope you're inspired. I hope you'll be in touch with these people. I do want to make one point to note that the Pacific Island Students Fighting Climate Change were keynote speakers at our annual seminar this year. And they're also a partner organization with the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee, amongst the many other groups that they work with. So we're very proud of that connection to the Pacific Island Students Fighting Climate Change. And now that we know what Vhon and Margaret are doing, we really want to support and help them in their work, because it's also very, very inspiring. So thank you all for being here. Thanks for all the people that spoke and organized this, our 2 interns. Thank you. And we'll do this again, but you will hear from us. We'll send out a survey. We'll be in touch. Please respond to our messages and get involved, really get involved. It's important for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.